right. Thanks a lot, Zach. I appreciate you having me. So I had kind of short notice in coming here today. I had planned the coding school sort of thing that I'm going to run. I guess maybe I'll talk about that so I don't lose track of it. For anyone who's interested in learning the basics of what we call front-end web development, there's the concept of back-end, which is very strong math, but then front-end is also technical, but a little bit more design-oriented. I'm teaching a free class here for 5 weeks. It starts tonight. It's 6:30 to 8:30 every Friday, with one exception of some other conflicting event. So anyway, feel free to come on out. We're going to study JavaScript, Angular JS, HTML, and CSS. So those are the sort of topics. For those who don't know, if you can get good at Angular JS, you'll have a job in about 10 seconds. It's extremely hot right now as a skill set, and I chose intentionally to focus on that because of that. So anyway, so a little bit about my background. I was a student at University of Delaware about 10 years ago, so 2004-ish, 5, something like that. And I was a philosophy major when I was here. So not really very technical, not really very business-oriented at all. And during that time, actually, I met my wife, who I've been married to for a while now. And the first thing that I did in terms of entrepreneurship was left school, so I never finished my degree. And then I took over. My wife had some health issues, and so she had a fitness consulting business that she had started. There's about, at times we've had as many as 20 part-time employees that work for us. And at the time, it was hard for her to manage because of her health troubles and stuff like that. So I left school, and we got married shortly thereafter, and I took over the business and helped to manage a team. So I had a little taste of just managing a team, working with people, all that sort of thing through that. And I enjoy the business aspect. It's very small business, not it was just me. I'm the general manager, you know what I mean? And we trained the people, we managed the contracts, managed negotiations with different gyms, hospitals, community centers, churches, senior centers especially. So most of the senior centers in the Delaware area are clients of our company. We provide fitness instructors that teach classes there on a weekly recurring basis, right? So, whatever, Pilates and strength training, stuff that's especially helpful to the older population. So that was that. And one of the things that was great about that opportunity for me is I got a chance to have some free time. So the thing about that it's not, one of the challenges that we ended up running into was that it kind of plateaued at a very low level from a business perspective, right? Because, we're paying our instructors X, and we're charging X times 2, to teach these classes to these locations, and that's cool. I mean, we have no location, so we have no overhead. Very little we have some insurance costs and basic costs, but very, very low in terms of overhead. So from that perspective, it's always in the black. But the problem is, how do you take that to the next level? You know what I mean? And especially when you're location based, right? So you can only have so many locations, and there are only so many places that are public venues that want to have fitness classes on a weekly basis. So around the same time, I had a friend who was a performing artist, right? And she was younger than I was at the time, and so I was at that time, 22, something like that. And she didn't have any money to have a website. And so the first thing I ever did in terms of on the track towards where I now am is I did a website for our friend, for free. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have any business charging for it. I could have, sure, but I didn't want the stress or the pressure, because it's like if you're learning something new, it's really hard to say like, you're going to charge a bunch of money right out of the gate. So, I did it for free. It took me a little while, and then, what happened was I ended up doing a website for her teacher, and that was the first paying gig that I had, and then her teacher's teacher. And so fast forward a number of years, I ended up doing, in this specific sort of performing artist niche, I had done most of the websites for most of the performing artists in New York City, and I became like well known in that sort of niche, so that was cool. I enjoyed the progress. I enjoyed the process because I learned a lot about design. I enjoyed design a lot, and so I did a lot of work with design in that whole stream of, or sort of track of my life there. But what happened was, similar to the fitness company, it kind of peaks out at a low level because you're dealing with people that are small business owners in a sense. If you're an individual artist, I guess you're a small business owner. I'm not very technical. I don't know what we call these things officially, but whatever. Anyway, so basically what happened was I got to this point where all the people that I was doing websites for were the top level in that industry, right? So they were in a different country every weekend of the year teaching dance classes and stuff like that all over the world. And, so I was known in that circle, but I would get all these requests from people, every day somebody would contact me and say like, oh, Brian, I've seen your website that you designed for Dancer X and Dancer Y and Dancer Z, and, can you do a website for me? And I'm like, well, sure. Starting price is probably around $5,000, and, that's it. That's the end of the conversation, right? So those people can't afford that, generally speaking, right? So only those people who were, like I said, in a different country every weekend of the year, teaching class and stuff like that. So, that was a major crossroads for me in my career, because what happened then was I had to either rebrand myself and move out of the niche that I had pigeonholed myself into, you know what I mean? And I had to basically say, okay, I'm no longer a web developer designer that focuses on performing artists, websites or whatever. And I had never advertised. So all my business came from word of mouth. And so it was all just so-and-so saw the website that I did for so-and-so, and then they, wanted me to do their website too. So I basically had to think about what is the cost to jump ship from where I am now over to something that's more broad, right? So if I'm going to do like what I ended up doing, so we'll skip forward to the end of the story and then we'll talk more about that later, but I'm a senior UI UX architect for a large software corporation, and but if I were to make that jump without working for somebody else, right, and I were to do that myself, then I have to design web applications for people, and probably a lot of you guys are maybe familiar with this space because I understand it's similar to maybe the focus of this group. There's a lot of startups, right, that sort of cross-pollinate here. Is that correct? Yeah. So, but with startups, they're a dime a dozen, right? There's a lot of startups. There's only so many ideas that are actually going to take off. And if I were to do that, sure, that's cool, but I'm taking a step backwards, right? Because I'm basically at the top of this niche that I've pigeonholed myself into, but if I'm going to take a step back, then it's going to cost me a lot, is the problem, right? And, and I have bills to pay and stuff like that, and so that's a little bit of a tough pill to swallow. And that's where you get into people taking, taking investment money, you know what I mean? Because it's like, oh, I need to make this transition. I can do it, but I just need something to bridge the gap, and so I'm just too informal for that, you know what I mean? Like, it's not my bag. Like, I'm not going to take a bunch of venture money. I mean, and it's, you're not going to find an investor that's going to invest in you as a person either, right? So I would have to have a good idea, go out, do all the pitching and the sales and stuff like that, which I suck at and, don't really want to do. So, at that point, I basically decided that I wanted to shift directions, and so I decided I want to work for somebody else instead of working for myself. I'm still an entrepreneur, and to this day, this is true, and I consider myself an entrepreneur at heart. And what I was telling Zach before when we were talking before this little talk was, at one point in time I was applying for different jobs and talking around and stuff like that, and I had one guy who was nice because, it's encouraging for somebody to give you this feedback, but he told me politely that I was overqualified for the position that I had applied for, and he said, you should be looking at being like a technical co-founder instead of just a, regular developer or whatever you want to call that, or something like that. And, we went back and forth a little bit, and that was cool, and he had some kind words, because he's a technical co-founder, right? He's the owner of that company, telling me, like, hey, you're trying to, fit in the same role that I'm already in, and that doesn't really fit, and, so that was cool. But I guess the point is that I could at any point decide to move into that role, to be a technical co-founder, right? And I'm willing to do that if the right opportunity comes along. But one of the things that I've found in entrepreneurship and my own career journey is that it's a pyramid, right? It's easy to forget that there are the the grunts at the bottom of the thing, right? And I'm somewhere at the bottom. I'm not a CEO of a company or anything like that, and what I kind of want to focus on, I guess, is I want to say that you can find your niche without necessarily being you don't have to own your own company, right? I found that I enjoy doing this kind of technical stuff, and I love what I do because I have a kind of ownership that you want to have. If I'm an entrepreneur, you guys share that feeling. That's why we're all here. And one of the things that I found is, through understanding myself better over the years, I like to have ownership over things so I can make sure they're done right. You know what I mean? So from a technical perspective, I like to oversee and to make sure that everybody knows and has the tools they need, that they're not, blocked in any way from doing their day-to-day work. And so that's what I do now. I spend half of my day doing what's more like management, but it's technical management. If I had no programming experience, I couldn't do it, or I would have no value to the company. But I take other developers who are more junior, I mentor them, I teach them, I help them get through roadblocks that they encounter so that they can get their job done and do a better job and contribute to the team. Facilitate a culture that's open, right? So that there's one of the problems in a technical space is that there's a lot of competition, right? So one of the things I'm always on the lookout for when I'm hiring people is I don't want somebody who feels like they're in competition with me. And you can get that vibe in an interview where somebody comes in and they're like, hey, they're trying to show off. And that's fine because that is part of the context, but there's a different vibe that you get where they want to make sure that they're the smartest person in the room. And it's nobody's the smartest person in the room. The whole point is that as a collective, that's where we shine, right? So everybody knows something that nobody else on the team knows, and it's my job to help bring that out, to find what each person is best at, so but if I were not doing any coding and it were just like a social mentoring type of role, I would not be happy in my position, right? So I do a lot of programming too. It's just that it's at a slower pace, I have to constantly, I'm bleeding out, you know what I mean? It's I can't quite do all the coding that I want to do because I got all these other distractions, but, and anyway, you get the point. So for me, I guess the thing that I want to, like I had started to say before, forgive me. Who thinks that I rabbit trail a lot? Because I do. Is everybody confused right now about what I'm talking about? No? Okay. All right, cool. I connect a lot of thoughts, and sometimes it takes a long time to loop back to the original impetus for what I had started to say. So anyway, the point is, I think that you can find your niche wherever. For each person it's different, right? So what I found about being an entrepreneur in myself that was critical was that part that I said before, right? That I like to have ownership over something, to make sure it's done well, to say like, this is my baby, right? This is my thing. And I have that in my position. So I don't have a gaping void because, I'm supposed to be an entrepreneur that owns a Fortune 500 company and I'm not. You know what I mean? I found that that's a great position for me. I share leadership of a team of about 15 people, and me and one other guy are, so in the web world, we have a concept of front end and back end, right? So back end is the guy that studied mathematics and physics and stuff like that, and I'm like the like dunce who like studied design and philosophy, and I care about how people feel when they interact with the web application instead of just like what's the algorithm that you use to generate the private and public keys, and how do you do all that kind of stuff, right? So and I know some of that stuff too, and that's fun. But anyway, so I'm real happy in that space, and I think that. So let me go back again to the story, right? So I decided that I wanted to stop working for myself, right? And actually, what I hated was, this is almost missed an important point. I had this volume of work that was really high, right? And it was more than I could do. And I needed to hire other people, so I needed to scale up. And the problem that I ran into was I just didn't have the money, and I didn't want to take, investment money to do it. Like I said before, I could do that if I had an app that I was selling or some sort of startup company, but it was just a freelancing business whereby I was a solo freelancer and looking to move to be like an agency, right? Where you would have multiple people doing the work because there was more than what I alone could do. And lacking any kind of funds for it, the best I could come up with was think about people I knew who were savvy, and so I had a friend who I didn't pay very much money, and I brought him under my wing, and I was going to mentor him and stuff like that. And it was just a huge failure because, we're still friends and everything, so it didn't end as badly as it could have, but I suck at figuring out how long things take. You know what I mean? How long does it take to go from no knowledge of programming to you have a solid foundation, and I can lean on you for the easy stuff so that I can leverage the whole thing properly and the machine works. You know what I mean? So I tried to do that, and it just didn't go well. He didn't learn. I couldn't tell, am I a bad teacher? Is he a bad student? And it just really tore me up, you know what I mean? I felt a lot of guilt about the whole situation at a personal level because he was my friend, you know what I mean? And I didn't want to disappoint him or let him down. So anyway, that was all the way up until the 11th hour, right? What I mean by that is I had this high volume of work, I had this guy I was trying to teach, which is the worst time to teach somebody. You know what I mean? When you're so busy that everybody's knocking down your door and you don't have time to teach somebody. So it's a problem, and there are people who understand better how to solve these problems, and the people who have that understanding, they're business development people. I'm not a business development person, that's not my strong suit. That's one of the things I learned through this whole experience was just not my bag. Pure management, is not my thing, right? I can do technical leadership, but the more management specific type stuff is not really where I want to be. So anyway, like I said, he worked for me right up until the last minute when I sort of closed my doors, right? I never officially closed my doors. I still take freelance stuff from people that I used to work with who are desperate, and it's nobody else knows the code as well as I do, and it's only going to take an hour or two, so I'll fix their website or whatever. And they pay me for web hosting. I have my own server, stuff like this. But it's mostly just shut down. You know what I mean? I don't spend more than 10 hours a year on it or something like that. So anyway, he worked for me right up until that point, and then I jumped ship and I started working for a startup company. So one cool thing about where we live today, the industry today, is competition is going to be a little bit more fierce because the talent pool is bigger, but I worked for a couple of companies that were remote only. So, I worked for a San Francisco-based startup that did Facebook, they used to have a really difficult way to interact with their advertising platform, like the ads that you see on Facebook and stuff like that. So this company basically was providing an abstraction layer where you would log into their system and you could deploy Facebook ads from there. So you could do A/B testing to compare, thousands of different ads. So what would happen is like Victoria's Secret would get on there and they would launch 1,000 ads at the same time, and they would see which photo associated with the ad performed the best, because they could have 1,000 running across the board and have the same specs on all of them except for just the picture. And then they would refine, right? And they would remove the ones that were underperforming and refine their campaign over time. And they would use our platform to do that. So, I worked for that company for a little while, and that was hard. I jumped in and I was over my head, to be honest with you. Basically, and this is like, wow, this is weird. This is like a little bit weird to admit publicly because nobody likes to talk about they got fired. But I got fired, you know what I mean? And I don't blame the guy who fired me because I was underqualified. And I did my best to present myself in a fair way, and he did his best to assess whether my skills were good enough, but they weren't. You know what I mean? And at the time, I had a lot of experience with more design-oriented aspect of things, but this is when I first got into the more hardcore programming aspects. And basically, it was a sink or swim situation, and I sunk. So, anyway, so I did that. That was like a 3-month thing. And then I left there. I was super depressed for a long time after that because that was like a huge failure for me. I was like, man, this sucks. I can't believe this happened to me. I turned away and closed my doors for all these other people that were wanting me to do their website. You know what I mean? Did I make the wrong decision? Should I have stuck with where I started? Should I go back? Do I go forward? Anyway, in the end, I stuck to it. I actually just didn't work for a month or two or something like that. And then after that, I got another gig, this time for a less technically ambitious, sort of position or something like that, right? So I still was doing programming and design, both. But the guy who was kind of my team lead at the time, he was real gracious, and he taught me tons of stuff about programming and really helped me. He was this really nice guy, this like crazy organic farmer hippie guy that lives in Canada, and but he was a great guy, right? And so I learned a lot from him. Really grateful for everything that he taught me to this day. And so that went better. I did that for a while, and you know what? It's a startup, right? So the problem with startups is they're startups, and no, I'm just kidding. You guys know what I mean, right? Some startups are, Facebook was a startup, right? So if you're in Facebook, then you don't have that problem. But anyway, so what happened was, they did this thing from a business perspective that I thought was a terrible idea. They were starving for money, and they had this company that wanted to install their software in this particular context, so that they could use it, right? But they needed some customizations to it. But those customizations were non-trivial. It was a lot of change. And so basically they were going to hijack the entire development track for 6 months, or something like that. And so what happened was they basically agreed because they didn't have a choice. And so, this time, so I lost this job because I got laid off, you know what I mean? Because they had to downsize the team, because the effort had to focus on this one really limited track. That company, I guess, is still in business, but the movement from my outsider perspective has kind of slowed to almost a halt. So I think that I don't know how it's subsisting or if it will, but anyway, so that's that. And then after that, and it's like there's not much more to say. I think I'm around the end of my time here as well. But after that, I worked for an agency in Conshohocken, Pennsylvania, so it's about an hour from here. And they were like a design agency. So I got a chance to work with some real large clients like, Comcast and ADP and do sort of consulting, but I was now a consultant through a larger organization, right? So they had the business development stuff in place, which was needed. That was the missing link, for me, right? That was the piece that I never wanted to do. I didn't feel like I could do. It was too much risk for me, and too much risk for me to hire someone else to do it, is what I mean, and I didn't want to do it myself. So that was a great experience. Because they're mostly designers, I found myself really wanting to be more technical, and so I gravitated towards more programming-heavy stuff. And basically, I kind of outgrew that job after like a year and a half or so, because I wanted to do more complex stuff, and there was not people asking that company to do stuff of that complexity, right? So then I moved on to the job that I have now, which was only about 7 months ago. And so I'm a software engineer on a team. I just happen to be the more design-focused person in the room and that sort of stuff. And I share leadership with somebody who is more of the, physics and mathematics and all that stuff is his bag, and we work great. I've never been happier than where I am now with my career. It's rare that you work with somebody that you feel like you can be friends with, and it's like me and this guy that I sort of co-lead with, we're like really close, and we're good friends, and it's just like that vibe, when you find that vibe where you can work with somebody, and there's so much synergy that happens there when there's no difficulty in communication, when like the other person, you can always trust that they know that you respect them, they respect you. If I say something or critique something from a technical perspective, it's not because I think, oh, you're a crappy developer and you don't know what you're doing. That happens a lot. There's a lot of ego in programming and software development and that sort of stuff. So, that was for me a good place to land, and that's where I am now. And maybe someday I'll be a technical co-founder, but for me, I'd much rather be where I am now. I'm very well paid. I never would have thought that I would make as much money as I'm making now. I'm just being honest. I can't believe I have to pinch myself, you know what I mean? And it's been a great journey, and I just want to, Zach said talk about things that have happened, talk about failures. So hopefully I captured a lot of failures that happened along the way to get to where I am now. I didn't even talk about one. I did try to start a startup one time, where we had this fitness business and we wanted to make it like, what if you could get certified online, something like Code Academy, where you could go to get certified for fitness instruction and stuff online, because the cost to do that's anywhere from $50 up to $500, and none of them have like videos and stuff where you can actually learn online. So it's a great idea. But once we started doing it, I hired a developer. My wife was helping out because she's a good technical writer and stuff like that. And we're making these manuals that people are going to study before they take a test, and I got to write an online testing system, program that out. And what happened was it started as this little thing where it's like, oh, this is a great idea, we'll do this. And before I knew it, 4 months later, it had snowballed to the point where it was like, I thought that it was going to be 6 months of work, and it became clear that without a bigger team, it's going to be like 5 years of work. By the time it's out, it's already somebody else released the same thing. So, so that was one of many. I have another, and then I have another project that's 3 years later and still not released. That one's not officially dead because it doesn't have an overhead. You know what I mean? Like it's still sitting on my shelf with like one more bug. If I fix it, maybe I'll release it. You know what I mean? So that's the idea of capturing all those performing artists, so they can make their own website instead of me having to do it. Because I still get those emails, and I'd like to sort of capitalize on that if there's a way to do that. And so it's a sort of, it's just more targeted at that audience than something like Wix or whatever. So you guys know that this kind of, it's like that sort of thing. So anyway, I don't know. Hopefully that is helpful. I think I'll just take questions or whatever.
Yeah, a bunch of students here have technical business ideas and have trouble finding technical people to help out, and even sometimes when we can find people with the right skills, it's hard to attract them to work with you, even if you have the best intentions.
Absolutely.
So I was wondering if you had any advice on that.
It's a good question. I think that one thing that one thing that I've learned from, so the last project I mentioned is called Art Site, right? That's the thing of making your own website and you're an artist or something. And then the other one is the fitness, website. So those two failed software projects, maybe the one won't be a failure, hopefully. But in any case, one thing that I've learned in that process is it's really easy to lose heart when you're trying to develop something in isolation, right? So one of the things that I've determined is that I will not, this is just me personally, right? But I think that it might be related to the bigger problem at large that you're talking about, which is that it's really hard to stay motivated when you're the only person that's doing it, right? So you have an idea for a project, and you need a person to implement it, to build it, right? And how do you? So yeah, there's something about two people is better than one because there's synergy that happens, right? And so you are synergistic. But the thing about development is it is really hard, and it's. My personal decision is that I won't technical co-found unless I have another partner. It basically, if I don't have another technical co-founder that's on the other side of it, then I basically am mostly out. You know what I mean? So from my perspective, I think the thing is that when you're starting with nothing, hire a freelancer, right? And just don't make that person a partner. Right? Hire a freelancer and get a prototype out the door. It doesn't matter if it's dirty. It doesn't matter if it sucks. You need to then, once you have a demonstratable thing that does something, then you can take that to somebody like me and we're like, okay, yeah, that's a good idea. And I'll buy into it, but I want you to hire another developer too, right? But the first stage is throwaway. So that's my recommendation because there's no shortage of freelancers who are maybe more design focused. They don't have the engineering background to make something that scales to 1 million users or 1 billion users like Facebook, right? But they want to get stuff in their design portfolio because they're like I was, 5, 6, 7 years ago, where I was mostly a designer. So if I can show it as a screenshot in the gallery of stuff that I did in my portfolio, then I'm happy. So you can just hire somebody like that. And the cost to do something that's lo-fi like that is not that great. You should either be able to afford it yourself or take a very small, I'm not talking about like a bank loan, loan from your parents or whatever, you know what I mean? Like $5,000 should get you most of, the kind of prototype, if not 2 or 3, depending on who you find, you know what I mean? So get something out the door that people can touch and use, and then you'll get buy-in from people like me if it's a good idea. You know what I mean? So that's my recommendation anyway. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
So if you're buying, what will happen?
If I what?
If you're buying the idea with the prototype that you just described,
Yeah.
so what will happen? You will invest it on it, or you will?
Great question. That depends on this depends a lot on the product, right? Who's the owner? It's your decision. Are you asking for advice it's your idea, you just built your prototype, and now where do you go next? Is that your question? Or do you mean, what do other people do?
Yeah.
Because
So here's how is he involved?
Yeah. How are you going to be involved? Yes.
How
Yeah.
are you personally involved?
How do I personally get involved?
Once
You probably take out a loan and you get enough to pay my salary for a year. You know what I mean? That's basically the deal. And there are different approaches, right? So it's very, very, very rare that someone like me is going to buy in on ownership only. You know what I mean? That's going to be really hard. Yes, you can find it. You know what I mean? It's possible. I don't want to crush anybody's hopes, but at the same time, it's a much, you're going to get somebody with a greater level of technical excellence, which ensures the viability long-term of your product by just taking out the loan to get money to show that person, rather than just, ownership only. Because I get, that proposition that I just outlined for you, where you come to me and you say, I have enough money, I'm going to pay you this, I'm going to pay you X dollars plus X% ownership, right? That kind of a split, that's appealing to somebody like me. I've had many people come to me with, we'll share ownership, and it's a no money deal. It's just, percentage. You know what I mean? Like that is, easy to come by. You know what I mean? So if you put money down on it, whatever the amount, that'll depend on the person, and that's all about your negotiation skill, feeling out where they are and what they're expecting and all that kind of stuff. But I would say that's the key, right? Because otherwise, that's why I recommended to him, build a cheap prototype first with somebody who you already know you're not going to continue a relationship with. Maybe you will, but I mean, you're not hiring them because you expect that they're going to be able to scale your product to 1 million users. You're hiring them because you want to show something to people, get investment money, get technical people on board, and that sort of thing. You know what I mean? So I mean, I think that answers it. Does that? Yeah.
So basically, you answer from the technical person's perspective.
Yeah.
Rather than the investor or the other.
Right. So how do you get? And so the investor. Well, so the investor, getting the investor on board requires the prototype that I talked about with him, right? So you show the investor the prototype. They don't know anything about the fact that the code is shit under the hood. That they don't care, and they never will. So that's fine. That's enough to get their buy-in. In terms of like people that just are capital only. You know what I mean? So.
This is more of like just a personal question
Sure.
to you. So you said that you were like really happy with the job that you're working on right now.
Yep.
So what are your plans with that? Are you just plan on continuing that, or do you actively search out other?
That's a good question.
companies where you could be?
Yeah, that's a good question. Right now, I found that the interpersonal synergy is one of the things that's hardest to create, right? So when I was working for the design agency, I had this boss that was like really amazing, like really good at mentoring and saying like, what's your career trajectory? We want to enable you to be able to get to the next level in terms of wherever you want to go. So really great manager in many ways, right? But there was a factor whereby that person was limiting me from a technical perspective and sort of put a damper on me in that regard, and that made it difficult. So in the end, I left. But the fact is that, where I am now, that synergy, that interpersonal synergy and the team synergy is so strong. That's one of the hardest things to find. That is one, once you're talking not just a startup, right, but you have a real company like, the company I work for is like 150 people or something. So, we're feeding many families, right? You know what I mean? So, once you get beyond that initial level, it's harder, you have more breathing room to care about personal dynamics, right? So for me, I worry about the ego thing, you know what I mean? Because I've been contacted by Amazon and Google and what else? There's another big one that was cool that I mean, it's not the same as getting a job offer. So let's not, I'm not trying to like make something up just to sound cool or whatever. There's only, so 1 in 1,000 people get contacted, and then 1 out of 100 of those people get a job, or 1 out of 1,000 of those people maybe, you know what I mean? Especially for a company like, Apple, that was another one that contacted me. But the thing is that I'm not willing to risk like a move to like, New York City or San Francisco, leave all my friends and family and everything behind, and it's just not worth it, because I could walk in the door and there could be a person on the team that is just, I totally don't jive with, you know what I mean? And that person can really ruin the experience for you. And this is true of any job, right? But it's just, maybe I don't know if I'm right about this. Maybe I'm exaggerating its importance. Maybe it's just a personal thing that I feel that way. It's hard to say. Right, but anyway, I know for me, taking one of those jobs would give me an X% boost in my salary, and then my cost of living would quadruple, and you know what I mean? Like, in the end, it's like a wash. And it's like the only reason I would take a job like that is because it makes it easier to get the job after that, right? So if I worked for Google, then I can work anywhere. You know what I mean? If it's on my resume and it's the first thing on there, I can submit my resume to any company I want to work for and I'll just be in. You know what I mean? But the thing is that I'm already happy. So that place that I would work at after Google, like Google would be a big risk because, you know, it's weird, right? Google's not going to let people in that are jerks, hopefully. You know what I mean? So maybe I'm paranoid, you know, so whatever. But that's my, you know, that's my thought on it, right? Like I don't, so yeah, I would, and what was your original question? I just totally rabbit trailed on this. Because you're saying, would I take another, you know.
Would you take another job, or how about looking for like other companies that you could be a technical co-founder for?
Yeah. Yeah, so if the right, so I love creating things, right? That's why I'm in this industry, because I love to take things that don't exist and make a working thing that's a web app that's on your screen that you can interact with and do stuff with and whatever. That's like, I live for that. And so if the right idea comes along, and I've had a lot of failures in business, so that gives me some experience or some gut level ability to tell whether something's like going to take off or not, right? And if I see that thing, then I'll take it. But I get emails from like 10 or 20 recruiters every week, you know, and I don't ignore them. Like I'll read it just in case it's like Google. Like when I got contacted by Google, that was the first time I really had to sit down and think like, do I really want to stay where I am? Because this is a big thing to say no to. You know what I mean? So anyway, you know, whatever. But that's the idea. Like, yeah, I would definitely consider it. It's just that the thing hasn't come along. And once you get to this point where you're real happy, you know, to move you up the ladder becomes more and more difficult, right? So, you know, that's all.
Time for like one more question.
Two people, one
Okay,
question.
let's do two.
Roll the dice.
Yeah.
Okay, two? All right, sure.
I was going to ask why you dropped out of school.
I dropped out of school because I actually had to do that to help my wife. Like she was not able to, her business was more or less failing, the fitness company, because she was sick and unable to take care of it. So I did that because, you know, I cared about her. That's purely personal, you know what I mean? But I never went back because I just never needed to, you know, like I'm doing what I do and, you know, it would be more expensive for me to go back to school. I thought about it like 3-4 years ago. I talked to UD, like, you know, the people that do, what's it called? Continuing education for like, you know, people like me that are old has-beens that shouldn't be in school or whatever, you know, but I'm just kidding. But I thought about it, but it was like, all that time that I would spend finishing my degree, I have a year to finish, right? So I finished 3 and I have 1 more year to finish. If I had 1 semester, I probably would have finished my degree. But with 2 semesters, 30 credits, night classes, it'd be like years. And I could have taught myself so much in the industry. So one of the things that, one of my gripes with college is that, at least in my industry, they don't teach you, the thing is that the velocity at which change happens within like web design and development is unbelievable. I can't even, it's insane, right? So if they tried to print a textbook that covered the fundamentals of what I do, it would be outdated by the time it was edited. You know what I mean? It would be old as dirt by the time the editing was complete. So they can't even, I don't feel bad. I mean, I don't knock colleges or universities for not doing a more updated program because I understand that's a dilemma. But at the same time, I do think they could do better. Right, and so I would just be learning about like cold fusion or something. You know what I mean? Like nobody uses cold fusion. That's, you know, a community college wanted me to teach a course, and they looked at like I looked at the curriculum and it had like cold fusion. I was like, can we change this? And they're like, sure, you can do whatever you want. It's community college. We don't have any money, you know. So, you know, and that was cool. But like the amount of money they were going to pay me was like, oh man, like so painful. Like I'm gonna have to grade people's stuff and like create a lesson plan and get paid nothing. You know what I mean? Like probably less than $10 an hour or something like that. So anyway, yeah.
It's cool that you were supported by such big companies without even having a college degree. I know like my parents particularly, they think if you don't have that piece of paper, then you're screwed.
Yeah, my parents thought that too. But now I make a lot more money than they do.
One more question?
Yeah.
You actually is developed from the front end for the web application. So
Yep.
how do you communicate in your real job? I mean, in a real industrial
Sure.
setting, how do you communicate with the backend people, which they use different? You use HTML and JavaScript, and they use a different kind of language. So
How do we talk about code, you mean?
yes,
I
how
don't
do you
quite
transfer
understand.
code between each other? Or I just want to have a general idea how backend people and front-end people can work together.
Well, we have a unique solution to that problem, which is fairly new. So JavaScript is one of my main focuses as a programming language. I know some PHP, I know a little bit of Ruby, a little bit of Python, but mostly I spent 95% or more is JavaScript, right? And you can do server-side programming in JavaScript. So in order to prevent that sort of disconnect where you're always moving between, oh, it's HTML, now it's CSS, now it's Java, now it's JavaScript, don't confuse this too. You know what I mean? And all that sort of stuff. We've merged our platform. So we have a legacy of old products that is sort of schizophrenic. There's like 4 or 5 of them. Some of them should be one. And in fact, we've decided that all of them should be one. So we're merging all the products, and I'm spearheading the effort of completely taking everything that's the best from these, keeping it, things that suck, let it fall away, and we're rebuilding a whole new platform, and it's all JavaScript. So the server side is Node.js, and the front end is JavaScript with Angular.js, which is the topic that I'm going to be teaching tonight. So, that's how we solve it. But in terms of older stuff, it's a problem. That's the end of the story, right? You're right. How do you do that? It sucks, and that's why we moved to a full stack JavaScript, kind of approach, right? So we try to hire people that are both front end and back end. That's one of our goals. That's a kind of a hard ask because it's a lot easier to find people that specialize in just one or the other. So like I'm a full stack developer. I do server side stuff in Node, even though I happen to be the lead for the front end. You know what I mean? So everybody on our team has different strengths and weaknesses, but they also are more generalist. So that's how we handle it. It's hard to put a team together, and it's expensive to put a team together that can do that. So, that's my answer, I think. Cool, thank you very much.